Good evening and welcome everyone to our first session of 2021. We're finally done with 2020, and moving on in many different directions, hopefully this year and more positive ones. We're starting this year with design, something that we all, I think, agree permeates every single thing that we do, from the newspapers we read, either physical or online, to the way we drink our coffees and teas, to what we put in our homes, the chairs we sit on, the technology we use, and what we like more than anything. We have with us three fabulous voices in the world of design, and I'm going to introduce them very briefly before handing this over to Bandana to take the conversation forward. Our first is Paola Antonelli, who is Senior Curator at the Museum of Modern Art in the Department of Architecture and Design, as well as the MoMA's Founding Director of Research and Development in New York. Paola is a force in the field of design and has been an essential voice in the acquisition of several pieces that are part of the museum's permanent collection. Currently, along with critic Alex Rosson, she is working on at Design Emergency, an Instagram book project on the role of design in building a better future for all. Gunjan Gupta is India's leading product designer. Her iconic designs have been exhibited at Design Miami, Art Basel, Salone, Design Days, and several others, including the Kochi Art and Venice Architecture Biennales. She is founder of Studio Wrap, a New Delhi-based luxury interiors, furniture, and product design studio, and recently conceived and launched her new design brand Ikkis at Maison in Paris. Bandana Tewari is a lifestyle journalist and sustainability activist, and a dear friend of mine as well. She writes extensively for the business of fashion, and her pieces have appeared in several publications across the world, including the New York Times, Vogue in India, Arabia, the US, and the UK, Harper's Bazaar, and Wallpaper magazine. She is a special advisor to the Copenhagen Fashion Summit and was Vogue India's editor at large for 13 years. Her unrestrained and independent voice, understanding of socio-political dynamics of fashion, and trademark forward thinking make her one of India's foremost authorities on fashion, design, and lifestyle. And I have no one else do this conversation than her. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you to the three of you for making time to do this across time zones and your incredibly demanding schedules. Thank you.
Thank you, Ishita, for inviting us.
Thank you very much too. Feel extremely privileged to be part of this incredible group of amazing ladies who inspire. But first of all, from each one of us, I would like to say thank you to Sunaparanta Goa Center for the Arts for giving us this opportunity. And there's no other introduction required with the panelists. And I'm certainly not going to be the moderator. We are going to have a conversation. But I did want to start off with an anecdote. And this is something that appeals to me very deeply. And as goofy as I may be, it is something that has made a huge difference in my life every time I read about it. And there's this Vietnamese Buddhist monk who was nominated by Dr. Martin Luther King, whose birthday was just a couple of days ago, for the Nobel Peace Prize. And the reason why he did that was he had this incredible way of connecting with an audience, and he would make his audience, he was speaking to, look at a piece of white paper, an A4 size empty white paper, and he would say, look deep into that piece of paper. And he said, if you're poetic, then you will notice that there are clouds on that paper. And if you're romantic, you'll notice that if there were no clouds, there would be no rain to feed the trees. If there were no rain to feed the trees, there would be, or the forests, there would be no trees. If there were no trees, there are no lumberjacks. If there were no lumberjacks, there would be no paper to be made. So your entire understanding of creativity and the interconnectivity is in that white piece of paper. So that brings me to the question. Given the times that we live in, and this is to all of us to contribute, what would the creativity of tomorrow be that is going to make us understand the beauty in things that we took for granted? A white piece of paper where we draw our dreams and our hopes, our scribbles and our doodles. Where do we stand with creativity? Paola, would you like to start?
Of course. Well, you know, any kind of, first of all, Bandana, so happy to be here with you and so happy to meet Gunjan. Bandana is also a good friend of mine from some time. So creativity of the future, any kind of thought about the future is wishful thinking, right? So you can find some germs today, but then you project your wishes onto the future. And I really do hope that after all that we've gone through collectively as a planet and also in different communities and individually, I really hope, I kind of believe that in the future, we will address our creativity to make a better world for all, as before Ishita mentioned. And when I say all, I don't mean only human beings, I also mean other species, and I mean also inanimate or at least considered inanimate objects. I just hope that there be much more altruism and much more of an extroverted way of creating. Of course, there will always be the lonely artists, and they are very, very useful in the metabolism of the world. But I do believe that there's going to be a resurgence of thinking about others. I hope so, at least.
Wonderful. And Gunjan, talking about resurgence, you and I we've lived in India. And in fact, in many ways, Indonesia is very much like India because we are multicultural, heritage countries with great provenance. And we can talk about, 2,000 years ago, this happened, 3,000 years ago, this happened in our countries and what have you. What do you think that we can take from these, what I would call, perhaps we're indigenous civilizations that were forgotten in this quest for modernization? And you, as someone who's been doing the most spectacular product design, where do you see us going?
Thank you for that question, Bandana. It's really critical that we actually go back to our roots, to our indigenous ways of living, and look at the wisdom that has always existed in our societies. India, like many other countries, third world countries on the brink of major development, have been cannibalizing their traditions. So it's really pertinent that we look at this, especially in the view of what we have all witnessed in the last year. I think for me, as a designer and the research that I've done in looking into how design has been entwined with life and the betterment of our well-being, is how health and home have been deeply entwined. A simple example is the fact that the yogic posture, asana, emerged in the absence of any furniture. It was a bare mattress that you actually sat on and existed on for centuries. Our societies have existed in that way of living without a backrest. And it was the introduction of elevated furniture that came with colonization and so on and so forth. So it's that actually led Sir George Birdwood to comment on the great art of furniture was to live without. So it makes me think about what are these aspects of design that are essential for our well-being as opposed to the overconsumption, the excesses that we find. Or, the way design was created with material, whether it was the terracotta or whether it was copper, or how they were deeply entwined into Ayurveda or ways of living, where the yogurt was set in a certain pot which had a certain mouth, or the rim of a particular pourer enabled it to pour, ghee or curry in a certain way. So it's these aspects of design and living that I feel are marvelous and something that the world should know more about.
Oh, I absolutely agree. It's funny because I'm Nepalese by my own provenance. I grew up in India. I live in Indonesia. There's a great commonality in the cultures that I have participated in. And when I'm, for instance, a simple gesture, and here we are talking about design, and we've been so used to a sort of an undemocratic way of looking at things that we do every day, as you said, if I were to sit in an environment and eat with my hands, with my fingers, which is part of my legacy, which is to be able to touch and feel everything that is put on my plate, or perhaps in the olden days on a banana leaf, it becomes a thing of shame. And or where we feel we're not gentrified enough. And, so this brings us to really what is meaningful design if design is a living thing. So Paola, like, what do you think? You've been curating the most amazing exhibitions, and you deep dive into these very profound thoughts that, I've been part of. Is fashion modern? I would have never thought about a t-shirt the way you did. I would never thought about a hoodie the way you did, and the kind of history. I have the book right here, and all the teenagers in my house go through it, and it's fascinating. But just like a t-shirt, just like a hoodie, the things that we do in our everyday lives, using our hands to eat, the way Gunjan said, the way the yogurt was made, the kind of vessel that was used, they were all design elements. So what is meaningful design today and perhaps post-COVID, Paola?
It's so interesting listening to Gunjan. I was dropping some notes, and now you're talking about items. Design as a discipline is so huge and so omnivorous. We're talking about eating. So it takes from science, it takes from technology, but it also takes from material culture and from ancient wisdom. So the most interesting designers, or also the most well-known designers, are those that are able to live in all these different worlds and that are able to take all these different wisdoms and bring them together in a meaningful synthesis. And right now, a lot of discussion in the world of culture everywhere is about post-colonial studies, right? So we're trying to understand, we're trying to kind of cleanse from a period in history where the whole world was taken over by a certain way of being. Forks and spoons were introduced, and you could not eat with your hands anymore from the banana leaf, and it became, especially in India, it became the etiquette was so enmeshed with the etiquette of the Commonwealth. So all of a sudden, entire ways of being were wiped out momentarily, we hope. And right now there's this whole discussion about recuperating, or at least learning from practices and behavioral codes that have been forgotten momentarily. A discussion of indigeneity and spirituality that is happening all over the world, and that really also is embedded in museums. For instance, the Serpentine in London put together a whole conference that a good friend of mine, Paola Bay, was involved in, bringing all the grandmothers of the world to talk about how to move forward. And people were coming from Colombia and from South Asia to talk about how to heal the world in very pragmatic terms. It was not only about discussion, it was also about what kind of cultivations should be used in the whole world. So to make a long story short, I am hoping that in the future, this kind of syncretic, this really open-minded, curious, and also daring way of looking at design in the future will be a practice that is taught also in school. I don't think that we should reject technology. I don't think that we should reject science. I don't think that we should reject modern architecture and design of the 20th century, but I think that we should take the best out of them and mix it with the best of millennia of wisdom.
Yeah, so that brings me to you mentioned, a younger population of people. Like I'm literally surrounded by teenagers. Even today in my house, they're trying to be very, very quiet, but they are some of the most brilliant teenagers that I've met, and they keep me alive and they make me goofy, all of that. But I also know they're extremely talented. So what I'm trying to say is, for people like you who are sort of participating in this language of design, like, are you aware, or do you think that the language of design has to change so that we are more inclusive of an entire generation that does not come from a very elite backdrop of a design philosophy, design ideology, something that has been so academic over time? Because we know, and I know for a fact, that where I come from, fashion design, whichever way you look at it right now, everything that is powerful in fashion has come from the streets. It was a fallacy to believe that it was a pyramid structure, that it was a trickle down. It wasn't. It came from the streets and affected change and the stylistic values in, as they moved up the scale. So should the language of design change for the times?
I'm happy to, I just had an incredible insight into the Art Povera movement in Italy that had sort of, fought these class wars of natural and artificial and these hierarchies of aesthetics. And the recent migrant crisis in India has put the whole aesthetic of jugaad and the crisis of this particular class of Indian society into the global forefront. As a designer, I have relied heavily on this particular aspect of Indian slipshod, Indian street size, invention, necessity-based design, heavily for design lessons. And I think it's thriving with the most incredible material palette, something that we don't recognize much as an Indian aesthetic or a design palette, just because we are so locked into the history of Indian aesthetics, or the grandeur of our textiles, our sculptures, our monuments. And there is a certain expectation that we have of that. On the other hand, this is a 21st century reality on the streets of India, thriving with jute, terracotta, metal, all kinds of wood, layering, coming on top of each other and creating its own vibrance and vocabulary of design. And of course, it is the ingenuity and the rawness of this design agenda that is, coming from poverty, from a lack of resources, that I feel is extremely necessary for our discussion with what Bandana just put forward as, politics of design aesthetics, or where the world is seeking inspiration from. So I'd like to, gain more insight into how you feel about it, Paola, with, this particular mention that I made of the Art Povera.
I'm with you 100%. So Arte Povera, just to translate for everyone, it means poor art, and it was a movement in Italy. And in the last part, it was around the 60s and 70s, and it was about using earth, using anything to make art. And then you talked about jugaad, which is incredibly important for me. But it's interesting because you're right, Bandana, there's this way of trying to stratify design from luxury and high academia, but in truth, design is for the people. And just like we're talking about jugaad, we did an exhibition at MoMA a few years ago called Humble Masterpieces, which had, the paperclip, the Post-it note. So of course, there is high, we shouldn't even say high design, there is expensive, rarefied design. And then there's the great design, which is the design that is used by as many people as possible. I feel that young people don't have any qualms knowing design, that they are literate, that they know the culture of design. They simply don't try to make it into something that is necessarily hard to achieve or that is too expensive. They have realized that design permeates all parts of the world. And just to tell you, I tend to always, without being corny, whenever I do an exhibition, I feel that it's a success when it is successful among kids. And I'm talking 6 years old to teenagers and stuff, because they tend to be the toughest critics. And last year, I worked on the 22nd Triennale di Milano, which was called Broken Nature. And it was about trying to explain to people that by using jugaad culture, by taking a lesson from the countries that don't throw any part of the animal away, that eat every single part because they're not rich, you can do so much for the future. And what made me happy about that Triennale is that the kids that were protesting together with Greta Thunberg, that were doing the Fridays for the Future, would meet at the Triennale to start their protest. So I still get shivers. That makes me feel that truly the message was clear, that we were talking about the kind of design that we're interested in, that can go forward into the future. So, oh my God, haute couture is great. And high craftsmanship is precious, and we should never do away with them. But we should incorporate in the culture and in the language of design a pride for everyday objects that are well realized, and also a critical sense of what is badly designed. I think that that's what is important for Gunjan and Ishita and Bandana and I to do, is to give people a sense of self-assuredness in being the design critics, because design is for the people, and reject what is designed in an inexpensive, unsustainable, irresponsible, or just bad, disrespectful way.
Right. I think the word that resonates with me is disrespectful, because I also see that a lot of the younger creative people, like in any other era, whether it was punk or, rebellion of the 60s, anti-Vietnam to whatever, it wasn't about the prettiness of things. It was a rebellion because there was an ideology that was being fought for. And I do see that it's not just about the beauty of things. In fact, if today you look at the subversion of fashion, then it is actually almost like the glorification of the ugly. And I'm putting that in quotes, right? So it is not about the prettiness of things. It's not about the beauty of things. It has to have swag. It's got to have the street cred. It has to have some sort of an appropriation that says, almost shows a middle finger to the establishment. And so when we're living in an environment like this, which is almost so divided in terms of age and attitude, I wonder how do we then inculcate an idea which, there's this Maslow's hierarchy of needs. He was a sociologist and a psychologist in the 1940s, and he created a pyramid structure of the needs that, first, of course, your physiological needs have to be met. Do you eat enough? Do you have a home? And then you move on to psychological needs. Are you loved? Do you have self-esteem? Do you have pride? And then you move on, and what he called was self-actualization, and which is are we becoming higher selves of the versions of ourselves. And later in life, he actually changed that even more from self-actualization to self-transcendence. And this can apply to anything that we do in our lives, right? That yes, you can create, yes, you can benefit from the commercial activity that you do, but then what is the purpose of creativity? Like, is that going to take you into a realm of spirituality? And I know spirituality is very subjective, because people can look at it and make it sound very religious, but you can be an atheist like me and still believe in spirituality. So where can design take us? Can design make us transcendental human beings? Can we become the ultimate better selves that we hope to be?
Okay, I was thinking, we're all like ready to pounce. So yes, definitely. And it doesn't have to be something that happens in a church or in a temple. In this way, I'm almost espousing an Asian view of religion. And I'm thinking of some craftspeople that I grew up with in Italy. Italy is a place that probably is very similar to India, where you have whole generations of craftspeople that perfect their own ware. So you have cabinet makers that have been cabinet makers for generations, and they really find their own self-actualization or self-transcendence, according to whichever Maslow pyramid you want to use, in making the best of their incredible gift. And I grew up really witnessing these exchanges between these craft people that sometimes were working in industries and the CEOs of the industry. So that's the greatness of Italian design, comes really from this. We were talking about the importance of respect for one's knowledge, and merging of knowledges that then create the best that could be. So I believe that design, through its actualization, through the actualization of an object that can be physical, or it can be a website, or it can be be, you know, it can be even the design of a system for a retail chain, can be completely devoid of soul or extremely spiritual, depending on what you pour into it. And even the idea of self-actualization, I was reading yesterday, work used to be work, something you had to endure until the 20th century. And it's only during the 20th century that it became a way to self-actualize, right? So it's all brand new, and it's all something that we should almost revise and review every so many years to explain or to define what self-actualization is. So I believe that design is the highest form of creative expression. And of course, it can help us with transcending ourselves, to make a long story short.
That was beautifully put. Gunjan.
I fully agree with Paola's rendition of the craftsman and self-actualization through the process of creation, through the process of design. And that's very much at the core of what design truly is and was. In fact, I was doing some reading yesterday. I have a Gita class that I do once a week. And we recently touched upon the Purusharthas. The Purusharthas are the four main pursuits of life. What are these goals that actually lead to the truth, or truth as in creation? And the first of them is dharma, which is righteousness. And seen through the lens of design, it is this conversation around sustainability and the materials and the choice, but it's really about the choices that we make, and which are, of course, on the material side, but also on the cultural side. And cultural sustainability of craft, of tradition, is just as important as material sustainability, which is obviously the environment and so on and so forth. The second pursuit of life in the Vedic text is called the artha, which means value. And it talks about economic value as well as the philosophical value. So once again, what is the value of things? Are we valuing things based on overconsumption and mass production? Or are we actually valuing objects and these elements of design that we joyously use or use just out of habit because of their beauty or what they bring to our lives? And that's where the whole creation process is inherent, something that's handmade, something that has a history, versus something that is mass produced and is really made for, you know, a wasteland to throw away tomorrow. The third aspect of Purushartha is kama, which is pure pleasure. And here is where we talk about the essence of beauty, the age-old principles of what makes one happy, what brings a smile to your face. It's the emotion. And I think this aspect is often overlooked in the process of creation. And finally, the Purushartha talks about the coming together of three elements, which is essentially value, the righteousness, and the pleasure of creation that bring together the final, salvation or truth or whatever you might call it. So it is that transcendence, and it is that ability to go to the next, to a higher elevated version of ourselves or design.
I mean, I love what you just said, Gunjan, because, I have been writing for a wonderful website called Paro. It's part of Good Earth, Paro Good Earth. And I dwell into Vedanta, which is secular. It's, in my opinion, non-religious, almost pre-Hinduism, pre-Buddhism, and what have you. And when you're talking about the first principle of the four that you learned, where you talk about dharma, for instance, and so it's so, like, when you think about it, dharma is your moral compass. So it allows you free will. This is what we forget when we talk about, because everyone's got karma and dharma tattooed on their bodies, and you're like a modern day sort of hippie, good for you. But what I'm trying to say is, people don't understand that dharma allows you free will. Dharma is literally just telling you that you have a certain moral compass, and that every situation that you are confronted with, whether it's through creativity, a decision that you have to make for your family, your friends, work, whatever it is, you have a choice to go this way or that. And the choice that you make, that dharma gives you, your moral compass defines how you want to take that path creatively, physiologically, emotionally, whatever it is, that defines your karma. So it's causation, right? So it is extremely scientific. It's cause and effect. So a lot of the times I feel whenever we talk about creativity and spirituality, we leave the idea of control to something that is unknown, when the fact of the matter is free will exists within you as an individual. And that free will is then going to define what the outcome is going to be, because you made that choice. There's a beautiful Latin saying, which I'm going to paraphrase. Who's the first person who feels good when a good act is done? You. When you do a good act, you feel good. Who's the person who feels shit when a bad act has been done by you? It is you. I mean, of course, that's a massive paraphrasing.
Yeah, I wish. So there are people that do bad things and don't even know about it, but yeah.
So what do you think, Paola? I mean, you know, sorry, just to make it very short, before you say your beautiful words. Living in this part of the world, and we are super Eastern, there's no doubt about that. In this whole world where we are so globalized, for the first time, I'm acknowledging, appreciating that it's okay to be different from the rest of the world. It's okay to say I'm Eastern. It's okay to say I'm Asian. It's okay to say whatever it is. And then now I see the difference between Eastern philosophies and Western philosophies. Not that they should be in conflict, but there is a huge difference in the way I can talk about dharma and karma, and the way Gunjan and I just talked about it. So we would love to hear about what you think as an Italian, probably grew up, which I also did, by the way, in a Catholic convent. I would love to hear that. We would love to.
First of all, I feel very comfortable with all the concepts that Gunjan has been talking about and that you have also described, because, you know, I grew up reading Siddhartha. I mean, it's like it was so much part of our bringing up, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle. I mean, all of those kind of bastardization of Eastern religions made for hippie grown, you know, young people in Europe. So in a way, it was a coming together of the, I cannot say European, it's very much of an Italian culture and the Eastern culture. Why do I say so? Because Europe is really a coming together of many different cultures that no matter how much you try to merge will always and thankfully remain distinct. So Italy and Catholicism, as you know very well, Bandana, is full of like dichotomies and juxtaposition and hypocrisies sometimes too, or at least they seem hypocrisies to the rest of the world, but in truth, they are very much part of our culture. A very pagan and pleasure-seeking streak coming together with this sense of guilt and punishment that is sometimes exercised in making. As you were saying before, Gunjan, making is a way to really grow your own self, and to also in the Catholic religion also to kind of purify or expiate your sins. So I'm making it very simplistic, but the pleasure of a great dish, of good food, of great art, and also of humble objects that are done super well is a way to live fully in Italy. And the Latin saying that you're saying, if you do something good, the first person to feel good is yourself, is very much present in Italy, as is also a sense of collective that is more connected though to villages and cities than it is to the whole country. Because, you know, Italy is younger than most countries in the world. Until 1861, it was a gathering, an accumulation of different city-states. And to this day, we go 45 minutes away and you find a completely different dialect and a completely different cuisine. So it still remains that way. But making beautiful is part of the culture and a way to also be good human beings.
I would like to just add to that. Italy has been very much part of my design journey. I spent a lot of time working in Italy, showing with galleries in Italy, and it actually really inspired me similar to my own culture of how they looked at their own age-old traditions, recycled that into the future, and brought in this certain aesthetic, which has become this very, very meaningful brand around quality, the whole made in Italy ethos, and how it started and what it actually meant back in the day. From an industrial point of view, it was always centered around beauty. It was around, at that time, looking into, local resources, bringing the best of whatever was there, craftsmanship, small businesses, boutiques, linking the world to very local seats of production, and so on and so forth. So I think it's that energy and that sort of old and new that Italy has is incredible.
Can I ask you, Gunjan, and you, Bandana, a question? Does Italy still matter? Does Europe still matter? Do the United States still matter? Where do you look? You're in the middle, right? Where do you set your gaze when you think about the future in your particular profession, product and interior design, and fashion and its ethics? Do you look to China? Do we in the West still matter?
Well, in my opinion, because I write a lot about this, Paola, we've lived in a world that we thought was democratic, and that meant homogenization, that everyone had to look the same, do the same. And we forgot the beauty of regionality. We forgot the beauty of the beauty of difference, that, sure, we are common humanity, but how we grow up, and, I don't have to explain this to you, but we forgot the value in the difference. So if you ask me, what do I love about Italy? It's always everything that I love about Italy and parts of Europe are the ones that hang on to and hold on to their provenance, because they have a history, they have a heritage, there's a story, there's a narrative, there's a difference that we can say, if I buy a Murano glass, I buy a Burano lace, from Italy, it comes with a whole history of you coming to India and saying, I bought something in a village in Rajasthan that's made by hand, and the tie-dye, the bandhani from Rajasthan. So I think it is not about labeling entire countries to have become sort of inhumane, but it is my individual choice and my own consistency and my research and my love for the idea of regionality is to always search out, always look for something that will resonate with me in the way that in many ways is no different from what I love from my own country. But it's a difference that we have to appreciate. So what do I personally think about Europe and, let's say, Italy? I think it is rich as ever, but please let us not be fooled by the conglomerates who are taking over and using a nation with such a history as a trademark. It's a logo in the back of your t-shirt, made in Italy. And I'm supposed to accept the entire history, the provenance of your amazing nation on a t-shirt that values nothing but is selling me the idea of Italy. So as a consumer, I don't want to be fooled. I don't want to be had. So do I respect Europe and countries like Italy with such great histories? Absolutely, yes. But do I want to be fooled by the conglomerates who are going to put a label behind and then tell me you're going to get this whole plethora of sentiments based on a t-shirt that is made unethically? For me, that's a no-no. So
very interesting.
no,
Thank you.
I value your culture. I value your culture very much. I'm beholden to it because I've learned so much from it. But I will not allow commercial vehicle to stigmatize it and homogenize it just so I'm just buying into an idea, just an idea of a place.
Thank you. And Gunjan, who do you design for? Like if you close your eyes and you think of, sorry if I started interviewing here, but these are things that I have this great opportunity of asking you, when once upon a time, the West used to be the center of gravity aesthetically of the world, and especially Europe, whether it's, so people always had that kind of point of reference all over the world. What about now? Who do you think of? What markets and what customers do you think of?
So 2 years ago, my studio launched a new brand called Ikkis, which is a completely made in India brand. It's inspired by Indian materials, rituals, stories, and so on and so forth. It's easy, affordable. It's a little different from my artistic brand, which is more, I've used it as storytelling device, creating objects of art. The question that you asked me was, who do you think of designing? Well, the whole landscape has completely changed. When we presented our first collection, we designed it. I was very much in the role of an Asian designer, being confident of my own background, my culture, my manufacturing abilities and capabilities as an Indian. And I presented this collection of 21 objects that was very much rooted in Indian culture. And at that time, it was an experiment. We didn't know what was the audience that we were going to be catering to. We presented it in Paris at Maison et Objet. And interestingly enough, we, of course, got a lot of great feedback from the Italians and the French and the American audience. But the ones that actually really sort of stood out in placing their first orders and helping us sort of convert our design agenda into commerce were the Chinese, the Gulf countries, and interestingly enough, Africa. So it was something that we learned. The second year when we came back, we obviously were a little bit more prepared for what we were going to offer. And we kind of chose that we knew that the Gulf countries were very much present and they were very eager, very curious. And we presented a collection that sort of played with that Middle Eastern sort of vibe. And we tailored it a little bit to their eating habits and things like that, which are, common to many cultures within the continent. And it was bang on. We were super excited to discover these new markets in that sense.
That is so important. And, we keep on thinking here we're the center of the universe, and until we wake up, it's going to be, you know what I'm saying? We're going to lose ground. And I've been talking to Milan, whatever officials come my way every now and then, and officers, and talking to them about other markets and other forms of design. And I'm just hoping that we will, in Italy, we say we will move the slices of ham away from our eyes.
Right.
Yes.
So here's a thought that came to me. So then, as people who work within design in different disciplines, whether it's fashion, whatever it is, right? So how then do we go beyond the surface of materials, given that we are facing such a crisis? We are, we are lucky. Like if I drop dead tomorrow, I can say I lived a big life. I did a lot of things, but I have a daughter. I have my daughter's friends who are just beginning their journey in life, right? So what do we tell them? How do we tell them? Because they all want to be creative. They're not going to be sitting in a cubicle facing a computer, whatever, 9 hours, 10 hours a day. They're going to be part of the gig economy, They're going to do gigs all over the world, and they're going to make their money and move along. So how do we then go tell them what does design mean? What does design, how can it transcend into an act of infinite beauty and compassion? However cool it may be, however sort of out there and avant-garde or whatever it may be, how do we teach that language to the younger generation? Like I feel that I'm facing this all the time because I am surrounded by teenagers who are very, very creative. And sometimes I feel I'm at a loss. And, you know, Gunjan, Paola, both of you at the helm of amazing design, what would you want to tell these young creatives of tomorrow?
Make
How do
few
we go
simple
beyond?
things. Just shrink your design practice to making a few things, but making them extremely beautifully with very ethical collaborations. Bring more, create more partnerships within hierarchies of, which have existed, try and break those, make them equitable partnerships. I'm speaking primarily of working with craftsmen in India, which really are faceless and you don't really, get to know them. They produce for us. So I try to actually, make it a very equitable partnership where it is a collaboration between myself and a craftsman whose work I'm explaining to a 21st century audience. And it makes me feel good. It goes back to what we talked about. There is this practice and I do it because I love beautiful things and I'm in the, in the business of design and so on and so forth. But I think at the core of it, it's something that really makes me feel good, is to be able to, elevate others. Because something that I've learned in the course of my practice is that, it is really an equal partnership. When you're working with a craftsman, what you learn from them is something that is really unparalleled. You don't learn that in a design school, in a college, and you can't teach them. You can't unteach them that what they know already. It is just something that you learn from them. They are so graceful and so humble about it that it doesn't appear to be that it is an equal association, but it is. So what I would tell the younger creative practitioners who are very hungry for, creativity and making amazing things, is to look at this, incredible wisdom, archive of wisdom that we have available to us. It's probably not for very long that, we might have access, or whether these craftsmen might sustain modernization. I mean, majority of the next generation of the master of craftsmen's families and children are moving on to other jobs, and we might lose out on this incredible wisdom. So yes, it makes me feel good. It's a great partnership. Objects of beauty emerge out of it. There is value in them for posterity. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, what I agree with Gunjan on the keeping it small, tapping into material culture, helping the material culture that already exists. To me, one of the biggest issues is the education of design, because it's still very much set on old paradigms, on the distinction between product design, furniture design, interior design, and that is so limiting. Beyond that is also the fact that most design education is too expensive. And so what happens is that students go into these schools, pay a lot of money, accumulate debt, come out of the school, they want a job. They don't take any time to experiment. They don't take any, they cannot afford to invest in creating partnership with craftspeople without knowing that they're going to have enough money to pay the rent. And all of a sudden, what should be an act of exploration of the landscape becomes instead this race to find a way to pay the rent. So the financial side of the profession of a designer is still extremely important and limiting, as is the categorization of design. As we said at the beginning, design is also interfaces, is also, in a way, food, it's also fashion. So there are many different interlocking and overlapping fields. And a reformation of the education system would be really beneficial. Also having some classes that are about working with craftspeople. The schools should send the students to get to meet this cabinet maker, this inlayers, all of the people that can really help them in their job.
Yes, I mean, we're coming to an end to our conversation, but I did want to talk about something that is very much at the forefront of the work that I'm within, which is sustainable fashion. And, to put it very fundamentally, very simply, is, we always think about the product, and product is beautiful. Of course, a product is beautiful, but a product is only beautiful if we honor the process of how the product is made. And the process is only beautiful if we understand the people who allow that process to happen. And that process is only valuable in this day and age if there's a purpose to it. So I feel like, I know it sounds like it sounds a little trite because it's like the 4 Ps, but is there a way that we can look at product that can elevate? Because we can look at it as a chair, and how wonderful it's a chair that we can sit on. How wonderful it's a t-shirt that we can wear. How wonderful it's a sneaker that we've always wanted to get and that gives you all the swag or whatever it is. But that's a product. But how do we encourage people to understand the people behind it? Behind the people, there's a process that takes time. Behind the process, there should be a purpose of understanding our environment and giving back. So I'm going to leave the two exemplary Paola and Gunjan to give us a few thoughts on this before we wrap up.
Paola, it's yours.
Okay, I'm going to go for it. So you're right in having this ambition. And I've always thought, Bandana, that my work is about making design as interesting for people as music is or film. You know, it took a while, but people have learned to appreciate what a production designer does or what a producer in a music realm does. And instead, they have not yet learned to appreciate a material scientist or, you know, or a structural engineer. And what is that for? Why is that? Probably because I'm taking responsibility. I feel that writers, curators, and other narrators should do a better job of like narrating what's behind an object and what's in the life of a designer. You know, there are books, biographies of artists, like, you know, galore. There are biographies of architects, quite a few. Biographies of designers, very few, because we haven't been able to create this mythology, which is sometimes a humble mythology, but comes from being good narrators. So I try to make the behind the scenes of an object as interesting, as compelling, as, to use a bad word, sexy as possible. And I feel that maybe if we keep on doing it with videos, with text, with articles, with exhibitions, maybe one day we'll get to making the process of design as interesting to people as is the process of art or the process of film or the process of music.
That would be absolutely wonderful, Paola. It would be incredible. And you're right. There has to be a little bit more dissemination around these processes and these journeys that are so incredible that designers take that we really don't know very much about. For me, I think I would, in order to answer Bandana's very thought-provoking question, I would, as a designer, I try and make my designs as I don't know what the right word for it is, but there is a safe course and there is an slightly unconventional choice of whether it's materials or it's a detail or it's a joinery. It's something that actually grabs your attention and makes you think about that process. Maybe it's a texture which really is not so refined or it's not so beautiful, but because you've sort of engaged with it, you probably ask the next question as to where did it come from and why is it there. It's that odd thing that I like to bring into my design objects that I feel bring in more curiosity and a sense of wonder in people that engage with it. So yes.
Well, oh my gosh, what an amazing conversation. And Ishita, would you like to add a few words before we wrap up? Because you've been instrumental in getting us together and allowing us to have this free-flowing conversation that goes beyond just objet d'art and talk about philosophy and creativity.
Thank you. I mean, I think just listening to the three of you is extremely inspiring and leaves us with a lot of things to think about more than anything, whether it's sustainability or how we go about our everyday, and also what value we give to objects in our everyday life in that sense. So what is just an object and what is a design object? Or Paola and I once had a very interesting conversation when she acquired video games into the MoMA's permanent collection, or was instrumental in doing that, and faced quite a lot of flack at the time, I think, including entire Time magazine pieces which were written against this kinds of acquisitions. So when we think about, what qualifies as something that tells a story of that moment in time, I think that changes quite a bit as we move forward. Hopefully, as we all discussed before this session, we're all moving forward. There's no such thing as going back to normal. We're going towards something different. I don't like the phrase the new normal because it just sounds like more of the same old.
Yes.
So more of, as we go forward. So I think that all three of you have given us so much to think about. So thank you again for making the time. And I hope we can do this in Goa sometime soon when we restore some sense of trust in the world again. So thank you all for making the time to be with us. And this has been amazing. Thank you.